I slipped into my husband's car one evening and, tucked inside the glove box, I spotted a tube of personal lubricant. I didn't say a word. Instead, I swapped it out with industrial superglue, just to see what would happen. And what happened next? Well, let's just say it ended with our neighbors calling the fire department in a panic. But let me back up a little. I'm so glad you're here. If you're listening, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know just how far my little story of revenge has traveled. That night, I sat at the kitchen table. The silence in the house was heavy, thick, almost like morning fog that never quite lifts. It had become my constant, unwelcome companion. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mom, kept ticking, each sound sharp and accusing, reminding me that maybe my whole life had been a carefully polished lie. My husband, Mark, had just come home from yet another one of his so-called business dinners. He didn't just look tired. He looked haunted, as if he was dragging around a secret too heavy for one person to carry. His face was lined with guilt, shadows carved around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. He tossed his jacket onto the sofa like it weighed 100 pounds, yanked off his tie like it was choking him, and crashed onto the bed without even bothering to shower. The air still carried his pricey cologne, but underneath was something else. A sweet floral perfume, faint but obvious, an intruder in my home, a confession I hadn't asked for. Minutes later, his snoring filled the house. It used to comfort me. Now it sounded like a cruel little lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, automatic rhythm of a wife who'd been keeping house for 40 years. I started tidying his mess, his jacket, his wallet, his phone, his beat-up old laptop. His phone screen glowed. An email was open, right there in plain sight. That made me pause. See, Mark hated email. He always said, "Linda, all that tech junk's too complicated. I'd rather just pick up the phone." But here it was. An email, glowing like some ghost from a life I didn't know he was living. Against my better judgment, but with my heart hammering, I opened it. It was short. Just a handful of words, but enough to split my world in two. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." Then a little red heart. That was it. Just that. But it stabbed me right in the chest. My breath caught. Dad. The word echoed inside me like a cruel taunt. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, playful tone? Hands shaking, I scrolled, hoping for more. But there was nothing. Just some weird, scrambled email address, meaningless, offering no answers. Only more questions. I felt a shiver, not from cold but from raw fear, like a gust of icy wind slipping through a crack in the life I thought I knew. I glanced toward the bedroom. Mark rolled over, let out another snore, his face calm, almost innocent. That made me furious. My heart pounded like I was stealing something in my own home. I shoved the phone back, nearly dropping it. Then, robotic, I kept cleaning. When I picked up his pants for the laundry, something crinkled in the pocket. A receipt. Fresh, crisp. From a fancy steakhouse in Houston. The date? That very night. My lips twisted in a bitter laugh. He'd told me he was in Austin, meeting his partners. He hated driving to Austin. But Houston? He loved Houston. His late mother had lived there, and he'd always been nostalgic about the city. And now, apparently, nostalgic enough to take someone special to dinner. The receipt listed 2 entrees, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine he'd splurged on for our 10th anniversary, and steak with pasta. I couldn't even remember the last time he'd taken me out somewhere like that. Maybe 10 years ago, when I opened my bakery. That night was burned into my memory. The candles, his proud smile, his toast to my success. Now, it all felt like a lie, a cheap snapshot pasted into a scrapbook of betrayal. I snapped photos of the receipt and that email with my phone. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I already knew. A wife's intuition runs deep. Something was happening, and I needed to face it. My hands shook as I went into the garage. Mark's old SUV still smelled like gas and that same perfume from his clothes. My stomach tightened. I opened the door and checked around with a flashlight. Loose change. An empty water bottle. Nothing unusual. Then I reached into the glove box and froze. My fingers brushed something slick, plastic. I pulled it out. A tube of lubricant, used, sticky around the cap. Proof. Ugly, Undeniable proof. I stood there in the garage, staring at it like it was a snake. Mark and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always blamed age, fatigue. So who was this for? I shoved it back where it belonged, wiped my hands raw with a napkin, as if I could scrub off the betrayal. Then I kept searching, more careful this time. Under the back seat, I found crumpled napkins, drenched in that same perfume. Not mine. Not his. I photographed everything. The lubricant. The napkins. As if photos could capture the smell. Then I closed the SUV and went back inside. By the time I sat down at the kitchen table again, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I picked up his phone one more time. I already knew the truth, but I wanted to see it in black and white. The inbox was empty. Just that one awful email, sitting there like a taunt. I checked his sent and draft folders. Empty. Too neat. Too perfect. Suspiciously clean, like every trace of his lies had been scrubbed away. A master of deception, I thought bitterly. My anger had turned into something harder, colder. But underneath it, a new feeling rose. Dangerous, determined. I didn't just want answers. I needed the truth, no matter the cost. By the time the sun came up, I was already awake, standing in my own kitchen like a ghost. The images wouldn't stop spinning in my head, the tube in the glove box, the restaurant receipt, that awful email. They circled me like vultures, a cruel carousel I couldn't escape. I busied my hands. 2 fried eggs. Toast. A cup of strong black coffee, just the way Mark liked it. I hadn't slept all night. He came down looking rumpled, his hair a mess, eyes half shut with sleep. He grabbed his mug, sipped, set it down half full. Got an important meeting today, he muttered. A line he'd used 100 times. No eye contact, just words tossed in the air like breadcrumbs. I'll be home late. He was so smooth about it. Too smooth. Lies wrapped in casual tones. It made my blood run cold. I forced a smile, swallowed my rage, and said, "All right, be careful." That was it. He patted my shoulder, light, distant, like checking off a box, and left. The door closed. Silence returned, thick and heavy, pressing down on me. I cleared the table, washed each dish slowly, the rhythm keeping me steady, like an anchor in a storm. But I knew I couldn't just sit and wonder. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. Mrs. Thompson. She'd been there for me years ago, when I was starting my bakery. She once told me about a private investigator who handled cases like this. "Linda, if you ever need it, I can give you Daniel's number," she'd said. "He's discreet. Reliable." Now, I needed him. When she answered, my voice shook. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson. Can you help me get in touch with Daniel? I need him." There was a pause. Heavy. Telling. Then she asked softly, "Linda, what happened? Did Mark do something?" I swallowed hard. My pride burned, but I couldn't explain over the phone. "I just need to know the truth. Please." She didn't press. She understood. An hour later, I got a message. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I'll help you. Meet me at noon, downtown cafe." At noon sharp, I walked into that tiny cafe. Old wooden tables. The smell of roasted coffee. Normally comforting, but today it felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. I chose a quiet corner, hidden from view. Daniel walked in. Middle-aged, short, stocky, simple blue shirt. His eyes deep, thoughtful, like he could see right through me. I slid him a flash drive with everything I'd gathered, the photos of the email, the receipt, the tube, the napkins. "This is all I have," I whispered. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words nearly broke me. He didn't react. Just studied each photo on his phone, wrote notes in a small notebook, calm and professional. "Mrs. Roberts," he said gently, "I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't worry. I'll update you soon." I nodded, holding back tears. "Thank you. I just need to know the truth. Whatever it is." "Go home," he told me softly. "Don't change your routine. Don't give him reason to suspect." I walked out into the crowd, but I'd never felt so alone. 40 years of marriage, built on trust, now crumbling like sand under my feet. I always believed Mark was steady, loyal, the one I could count on through anything. My anchor. My rock. And now? I had to hire a stranger to follow him. That night, I sat in my bakery, invoices spread across the counter, the smell of flour and yeast surrounding me. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. My heart leapt, pounding so loud it filled my ears. A photo. Mark, in his favorite blue shirt, walking into a fancy restaurant. Not alone. Hand in hand with a woman. I zoomed in, and my heart stopped. It was Emily, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tight black dress, heavy makeup, that deep red lipstick she loved. Her hair down. They didn't look like in-laws. They looked like lovers. Bodies leaning close, smiles secretive, hands touching too easily. Daniel sent more photos. Candles. Flowers. Emily leaning in, laughing, eyes sparkling. Mark raising his glass to her with a tenderness I hadn't seen in decades. My chest ached. In 40 years, he'd never looked at me like that. Not even when I was young, when I was that bright-eyed girl from Phoenix, full of hope. That look I thought was mine, forever, was now hers. At 2 a.m, another message came. A video. My hands shook as I hit play. Emily leaned in close, whispered in his ear. Mark laughed. A laugh I didn't even recognize. A laugh that wasn't mine anymore. They left together, and Mark, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her, like she was his date, not his daughter-in-law. I replayed the video again and again, like I couldn't stop stabbing myself in the heart. Emily. My daughter-in-law. The one I'd loved like my own, the one I'd taught how to make our families flan. And Mark, the man I'd built my life with, the man I'd given everything to. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions hit me like waves, one after another, threatening to pull me under. I saved the photos and the video onto a flash drive, noting every detail. The dates, the times, the restaurant's name. My hands moved on autopilot while my mind spun in chaos. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe Mark and Emily could do something so cruel. But the proof was there, staring back at me, undeniable. I stayed in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of fresh pastries, but it was like breathing in smoke. My world was collapsing. I remember the early days, Mark carrying flour sacks for me, the two of us laughing in the kitchen, dreaming big. All of it now felt like some sweet lie I'd been living for too long. The next morning, I stood in the bakery's tiny kitchen, checking off orders for a big downtown hotel. The smell of vanilla usually calmed me. Not today. As soon as I signed the delivery slip, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Just one line, Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence. I wiped my hands, bracing myself. My heart dropped as I opened it. The first photo showed Mark, in his gray shirt, leaving a law office near the city center. Right beside him was Emily, dressed in beige, her hair pulled back, sunglasses covering half her face. Pathetic disguise. They walked close, not like in-laws. Like lovers. Another photo. In front of a 4-star hotel with glittering glass doors and a gold sign. I zoomed in, searching for something to ease the blow, some sign that I was wrong. But it wasn't there. They looked too natural, too easy together. A world I wasn't part of. Then a video. My hands shook as I pressed play. The shot was from far away, but clear enough. Mark and Emily on a balcony, 3rd floor. His arm wrapped around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. Then, a quick kiss. Small. But enough to burn out the last bit of hope I'd been clinging to. I replayed it frame by frame, each second cutting deeper. Then Emily stepped back into the room, only to rush out again, throwing her arms around Mark, her face glowing like some girl in love. I nearly collapsed into the chair, gripping the table to keep from falling apart. Another message came from Daniel. They rented the room for the afternoon. Looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep watching. Just hours earlier, Mark had texted me, Linda, I won't be home tonight. I've got to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest. Sweet. Caring. A rehearsed kindness he'd used for years. But now I knew. It was all a lie. He wasn't meeting a partner. He was with Emily, in a hotel, in my own city. I saved every photo, every video to my hard drive, staring at each one as if to make sure it was real. In the video, the way he touched her hair, it was the way he used to touch mine 30 years ago. Back when we were young, whispering promises under the phoenix sky. Promises I thought would last forever. Now they were dust. I thought of our family dinners. Everyone gathered at the table, the picture of happiness. Emily sitting far from Mark, acting indifferent, even cold. Daniel once joked, "Mom, I think Emily can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I believed him. I believed them. But now I saw the truth. It had been an act all along. A perfect performance for me, for Daniel, for the neighbors. I felt like the biggest fool. A blind wife, betrayed right in front of everyone. Daniel had captured everything. The kiss, the closeness, the evidence of my broken reality. "Thank you," I texted back. "Keep watching. I need to know everything." His reply was short. "I will. Stay calm." That night, I returned to the house that had once been my home. Now it felt haunted. I pulled open a dresser drawer and grabbed a thick envelope. One by one, I printed every photo, Mark and Emily leaving the law office, walking into the hotel, standing on the balcony. I arranged them carefully, tucked them inside, and slid the envelope beneath old family pictures. One photo stopped me. The four of us, Mark, Emily, Daniel, and me, at Daniel's birthday a few years back. Emily hugging Daniel, smiling bright. Mark beside me, his arm around my shoulders, proud as ever. Looking at it now, all I wanted to do was rip it to shreds. The next morning, just before dawn, I heard the front door creak open. Mark stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "The partner was too difficult, Linda," he muttered, eyes bloodshot. "I had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired." I stood in the kitchen with a glass of water, watching him lie straight to my face. "Rest," I said calmly, like the dutiful wife. "You've got work tomorrow." He nodded, patted my shoulder like nothing had happened, and dragged himself to bed. Minutes later, he was snoring. Peaceful. Innocent. As if he hadn't spent the night with my daughter-in-law. When I was sure he was asleep, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a call from Daniel, the detective, his voice low, almost a whisper, like he was afraid someone might overhear him. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used special equipment. They didn't notice. I'm sending it now." My heart slammed against my ribs, but I kept my reply short. "Thank you, Daniel." "Send it." Minutes later an audio file landed in my messages. I put on my headphones, sat at the table and pressed play. The first voice I heard was Emily's, cold, sharp, driven. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want the whole chain. I want that old hag out of the house." The blow to my chest was physical. Then Mark's voice, deep and calm, answering with the kind of casual cruelty that makes the world tilt. "Don't worry about the papers. Linda doesn't know anything. Leave it to me." It felt like a knife twisting. They weren't just sneaking around, they were planning to take everything I'd built, the bakery chain, the sleepless nights, the deliveries, the reputation I'd carved out. Myself. I copied the audio to the flash drive with the other evidence and wrote down times and places, trying to hold myself together. The next morning, while the ovens cooled and the bakery smelled like vanilla and flour, my phone buzzed again. More photos from Daniel arrived, taken with a telephoto lens. Mark and Emily in his car, a thick stack of papers between them, Emily marking pages with a red pen while Mark smiled like a co-conspirator. Daniel texted, "They're trying to use a contact at the notary to make the transfer. I'll look into it." I zoomed in until the letters blurred, and yet I felt every detail as if it were being carved into me. These weren't ordinary work papers. I listened to the recording again, every hateful phrase sinking in. "That wretched old woman," Emily had said, and I flashed back to when she first joined the family, the meals I taught her, the flan recipe I'd shown her, the way I'd hugged her like a daughter. I wrapped a dozen pastries for a regular Mrs. Carter, and forced a smile when she praised my expanding shops, and while I handed over the box I felt hollow inside, a slow, white-hot rage burning beneath the surface. That night, under the yellow kitchen lamp, Mark ate his dinner in a flat, rehearsed tone and mentioned, casually, that I should look over some important business papers this week. He was testing the waters, baiting me into signing something that would drag me into their scheme. I kept my face calm, said I'd look later, and watched him drink until his words slurred. When he finally stumbled to bed, snoring, he left his keys on the nightstand, gleaming, tempting, and I knew my chance had come. I moved quietly, took the keys, walked out to the garage where his old SUV sat smelling faintly of gasoline and that foreign perfume, opened the glove compartment and found the tube of lubricant, the same used tube I'd seen before. I brought it into the kitchen, washed my hands, and then, because I was standing on the edge of something I could not turn away from, I replaced its contents with a clear industrial adhesive I kept in my tool drawer, so that at a glance it would appear unchanged. I closed the cap, set the tube back where it had been, and for a moment, breathing in the lemon soap on my hands, I felt the first small, savage relief of having taken control of something in a life that had been stolen from me. I slipped the tube back into the glove compartment, adjusted the seat and the floor mat exactly how they'd been, and shut the car like nothing had ever been touched. Out of habit, I checked the trunk. Just some crumpled grocery bags, an empty water bottle, and in the corner, an unused condom. My heart skipped, but honestly, I wasn't even shocked anymore. I snapped photos, adding them to the growing pile of evidence. Each image another nail in the coffin of their lies. Back inside, I set the keys back beside Mark's alarm clock, grabbed an old book, and sat on the couch pretending to read. The lamp light fell over the pages, but I couldn't take in a single word. My head spun. I thought about Daniel, my son, living what he thought was a happy life with Emily, blind to what she and his father were doing. How could I ever tell him? How could I shatter him with that truth? I thought about the bakery chain. 40 years of sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Every fight I had with Mark, defending my dream, believing, foolishly, that he was backing me. Now I knew the truth. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strip it all away. An hour later, Mark stumbled into the kitchen, half asleep, grabbing a glass of water. He noticed his keys where I'd left them and didn't think twice. "Still not sleeping, Linda?" he mumbled. I forced a small smile. "No, just reading a little. Go finish your water and get some rest." He nodded, drained the glass, and shuffled back to bed, snoring almost instantly. I looked at him in the dark, his chest rising and falling like nothing had happened. This man who once swore to love me until the end was planning to take everything from me. But he didn't know, I'd already begun fighting back. At dawn, sunlight crept through the bakery windows as I kneaded dough with furious strength, shaping loaves and pastries for a hotel order. I pressed every ounce of rage into that dough, my hands sore but steady. Back home, I tried to keep my face calm as I served him breakfast. He was already at the table with a mug of coffee. I set down eggs and toast, then said evenly, "Mark, I need to travel to Nashville tomorrow. I've got to sign a contract with a new partner. I'll probably be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him from the corner of my eye. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face, but what I saw in his eyes wasn't worry. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, squeezing my hand with that fake tenderness. "Don't worry, go ahead. I'll handle things here." That tiny glimmer in his eyes, the curl of his lips, like a weight had been lifted, it cut me deep. He wanted me gone, and I knew exactly why. "Thanks," I said, smiling faintly. "I'll call if I get back late." He nodded, finished his coffee, and headed out, saying he needed to get to the office. But as he left, his phone lit up on the table. A missed call. The name flashed across the screen, Emily Carter. My chest tightened. Before I could move, he rushed back, grabbed the phone, and locked it with a forced smile. "Forgot it," he muttered. Then he was gone. I just stood there, staring at the closed door, my whole body burning. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That day, I worked like a machine, delivering bread, signing invoices, smiling at customers, while my mind replayed everything. Mark, Emily, their lies, their betrayal. I needed more proof. Proof from their own mouths. That night, I pretended to be exhausted. I went to bed early and said softly, "I've got to get up early tomorrow to catch the bus, so I'm going to sleep." He gave me a gentle pat. "Rest, Linda. Be careful on your trip tomorrow." I closed my eyes, but I wasn't sleeping. I listened. Near midnight, his snoring stopped. I heard the creak of the bed, the faint glow of his phone. He slipped out of the room, thinking I was asleep. I rose quietly, tiptoed into the living room, and hid behind the heavy curtain. In the corner, he stood with his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, of course," he whispered. Come to the house tomorrow. No need for a hotel. Linda's got to leave town for a contract. She'll be back late. Then, faint but clear, I heard Emily's giggle. That's great, Dad. Finally, we can relax. Mark chuckled. Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting. My blood boiled. They weren't just sneaking around anymore. They were planning to turn my home, my son's home, into their den. I crept back to the bedroom, opened a drawer, and pulled out Daniel's old recorder. I'd bought it for him back in college so he could tape lectures. I checked the batteries, replaced them, and set it to continuous record. I hid it behind the bookshelf near the headboard, threading the wire carefully, covering it with a framed family photo, the one of the four of us at Daniel and Emily's wedding. I stared at their smiling faces in the picture, my throat thick with bitterness. Lies. All lies. I double-checked the recorder. The red light blinked, steady. Then I lay down again, pretending to sleep. Minutes later, Mark slipped back in, collapsing into bed, snoring like nothing was wrong. But my eyes stayed open, sharper than ever. Before dawn, I set the alarm, rose at 5, and sat in the kitchen with cold coffee. Mark still snored from the bedroom. The house was silent except for that sound. I stared at the skillet of oil already heating on the stove. It was the last piece of my plan. A smoke trap. Simple, but enough to raise alarms. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter, ran it toward the window, and fixed it to an old coffee can as a counterweight. With a single pull, I could light the oil, and the black smoke would pour out into the street. Enough to make the neighbors panic. I tested it once. The smoke curled up fast, thick and dark, like a warning. I turned it off immediately, wiped the stove clean, and made sure nothing looked suspicious. Then I slipped on my jacket, grabbed my big purse, and walked into the bedroom. I shook him gently, my voice calm. Mark, I have to head to the bus station now. I'm going to sign that contract. I'll probably be back late tonight, I whispered as I leaned down to shake him awake. Mark blinked, rubbed his eyes, and in a sleepy voice said, All right, be careful, Linda. Call me if you need anything. Then he rolled over, face buried in the pillow, already drifting off again. I stood there for a moment, looking at the man I once loved, the man I once trusted. Now he was nothing but a stranger, blind to the trap waiting for him. My heart felt heavy, but my legs were steady. Instead of heading to the bus station, I crossed the street to Mrs. Carter's house. She opened the door, her eyes catching on my purse. Worry flashed across her face. Linda, what are you doing up so early? Is something wrong? She asked softly. I forced a smile. Mrs. Carter, can I stay here for a while? I need to watch my house. She frowned, but said nothing more. Instead, she poured me a hot cup of coffee and pulled out a chair by the window. From there, I had the perfect view of my front door, the door Mark and Emily would walk through, the door where the truth would finally surface. Around 10 o'clock, a taxi pulled up. Emily stepped out in a floral dress, dark sunglasses hiding her eyes like she was terrified of being recognized. Mark opened the door quickly, glancing around before ushering her inside. My grip tightened around the coffee mug, my pulse racing. It's time, I muttered, sliding my headphones on and opening the app connected to the hidden recorder in the bedroom. The sounds poured into my ears, Emily's laughter, the clink of glasses, footsteps. Then Mark's voice, low and satisfied. We don't have to hide in hotels anymore. Emily's reply came with a cruel laugh. You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right? My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Hearing her spit those words, the old hag, cut deep. Then came the creak of the bed. More sounds I didn't want to hear. I closed my eyes and told myself, just a little longer, Linda. Just a little longer. Then suddenly, Emily screamed, What the hell is this? We're stuck. Her panic rang sharp. Mark's voice growled back. Shut up. Hold still. Let me see. I smiled. Perfect timing. With one touch, I pulled the string on my trap. The stove ignited, the skillet of oil flared, and thick black smoke poured out of the kitchen window, spiraling into the sky like a signal. Beside me, Mrs. Carter gasped. Linda, your house. It's on fire. I widened my eyes, pretending to panic, but inside I was ice calm. Neighbors spilled out of their homes, shouting, Linda's house is on fire. Call the fire department. Mr. Harris down the street dialed quickly, his voice urgent. I stayed by the window, sipping my coffee, eyes locked on the smoke. Through my headphones, Emily's voice cracked with fear. Mark, do something. I can't move. His voice snapped. Stop screaming, I'm trying. But I knew the truth. They weren't going anywhere. The glue had done its job. The smoke rose thicker, neighbors crowded the lawn, voices buzzing with panic. What's going on? Someone yelled. Where's Linda? Another called. She went out of town for work, someone else answered. Mrs. Carter's hand found mine, squeezing gently. Her eyes searched my face, suspicion flickering there, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. She already knew. Minutes later, the scream of a fire truck echoed down the street. My stomach clenched when I saw my son. Daniel jumped from the driver's seat in full fire chief gear, his face hard and focused. Get the equipment ready, he barked. There might be people inside. A sharp pain twisted inside me. My son, so proud of his family, of his parents, was about to walk into the cruelest truth of all. I wanted to run to him, hug him, whisper, I'm sorry, Daniel. But I stayed rooted in place. The plan had to finish. He swung a sledgehammer, splintering the front door, leading his crew inside. My headphones filled with chaos, the rush of boots, the clatter of hoses, Mark's desperate shouts mixed with Emily's sobbing. Do something, Mark. I can't move. Shut up, stop screaming. I squeezed the phone tighter, the app still transmitting. Then Daniel's voice shaken. What? What the hell is this? One of his men muttered, Oh my God. Another let out a nervous laugh before Daniel's voice cut like steel. Silence. That shout wasn't just to control his team. It was the cry of a son trying to hold himself together, trying to cover his own pain. I imagined him standing there, staring at his father and his wife, caught, glued together, exposed in the ugliest way possible. Outside, neighbors pushed closer, whispering, pointing. A woman's voice rang out, shocked. It's Mark and his daughter-in-law. Murmurs turned into a wave of judgment. Unbelievable. Poor Linda. How could it come to this? Beside me, Mrs. Carter pulled out her phone, recording quietly as she stepped closer, her camera capturing the scene inside. She turned to me with eyes full of pity and fury. Linda. You knew, didn't you? I didn't answer. I just nodded, my gaze locked on the smoke-filled window. The firefighters hesitated, then finally moved in. They wrapped sheets around Mark and Emily, trying to cover their bodies as best they could, and carried them out on stretchers. Emily's sobs filled the air, breaking with pain. Please, somebody do something. I can't take it anymore. Mark only mumbled weakly, Don't let anyone see us. But everyone had already seen. Neighbors stood there with looks of disgust, others laughed nervously, some just shook their heads. What a disgrace, someone muttered. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. My God. The ambulance pulled away with its siren wailing. People lingered in the yard, their voices buzzing. Mr. Harris shook his head and let out a sharp laugh. What a show. Two people so shameless, I've never seen it. An old woman whispered to her friend, Poor Linda. I stood among the crowd, pretending to be shocked, like I'd just come rushing back from the bus station. Daniel stood frozen in the middle of the yard, his arms hanging, his face ghostly pale. His crew avoided his eyes, quietly gathering their gear. I knew my son wasn't just shaken by what he'd seen, but crushed by who he'd seen. His own father. His own wife. The two people he trusted most. I wanted to hold him, to say I was sorry for letting him face that nightmare. But instead, I stayed close to Mrs. Carter, who silently guided me to the hospital. We sat in the hallway on the 3rd floor. I kept up the mask, the look of a wife who just found out her house had caught fire. Hours later, a doctor finally came out, sweat beading his forehead. Mrs. Roberts, he said quietly, we managed to separate them. No serious damage. Just some burns on the skin. They'll need ointment. I nodded, feigning relief, my fingers brushing the purse on my lap. Inside were 2 tubes of mustard I'd prepared. Thank you, doctor, I said softly. Can I see them? He led me to the nurse's station. A young nurse handed me 2 tubes of ointment, her eyes filled with sympathy. Ma'am, I know this is a very difficult situation. I'm so sorry. I gave her a weak smile. As soon as she turned away, My hands moved fast. I swapped the ointment with the mustard, smooth as if I'd rehearsed it 100 times. Inside the hospital room, I forced concern into my voice. Mark? Emily, are you okay? Emily lay in bed, her hair tangled, her eyes swollen from crying. She couldn't even look at me. Mark, pale and shaky, whispered, Linda, I can explain. I didn't let him finish. I set the tube on the bedside table and walked out. Minutes later, the screams came. Emily shrieking, It burns. My skin is on fire. Mark cursing from his bed. What the hell is this? Who did this? The hallway exploded with noise. Patients and families came rushing out, whispering. One woman gasped to her son, It's them, the ones from that video this morning. The father-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Another added sharply, Disgusting. They deserve it. Doctors and nurses scrambled inside, trying to clean their skin, shouting for neutralizers. But the humiliation had already spilled everywhere. Mrs. Carter's video of them being hauled out on stretchers had spread across the neighborhood, and now, all over social media. I stayed in the hallway, listening to the whispers, feeling like the entire world was witnessing their downfall. When the crowd thinned, Daniel walked in, a thick folder in his hands. I had called him after the ambulance left, asking him to fetch the envelope I'd hidden in my drawer, the evidence, along with divorce papers I'd prepared long ago. He handed it to me silently, his eyes empty. I opened it, pulled out the papers, and laid them on the table in front of Mark and Emily. My voice came out steady, firm. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these. Then do whatever you want, just stay away from my son and me. Emily collapsed, sobbing, turning toward Daniel. Honey, please forgive me. I made a mistake. Please, just forgive me. Daniel's gaze was like stone. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out. Mark tried to grab my hand, his voice trembling. Linda, listen. I didn't want this. I yanked my hand back. Don't say another word, Mark. You made your choice. Linda, please, he begged, but the nurse cut in sharply. Quiet. This is a hospital. I turned and left without looking back. In the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, his head in his hands. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Mom, he whispered, broken. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I didn't answer. I just wrapped my arms around him, holding tight, sharing the weight of his pain with mine. In that moment, I knew Mark and Emily had lost everything. Their honor, their plans, their marriage. But Daniel and I had lost a family too. All I could hope was that, with time, we might find some peace. A few weeks later, the bakery was busier than ever. The bell over the door jingled non-stop as customers came and went. Smiles, compliments, warm words. Linda, you're so strong, Mrs. Carter said one morning, clutching a bag of fresh flan. The whole neighborhood is proud of you, for defending your family, and your business, after everything. I smiled, thanked her. People called me strong, but I knew the truth. My strength was built from broken pieces. Every time I looked at the oven where I'd poured 40 years of sweat and tears, I remembered Mark and Emily, how they tried to steal it all, but failed. I was still here, with my bakery, with Daniel, with a new life. Daniel moved in with me right after that day. He didn't talk much about what happened, but I saw the change in him. He wasn't the light-hearted, laughing son I'd always known. His eyes carried a depth now, a wound that might never heal. Mom, I want to stay here for a while, he said that first night, suitcase in hand. I'll help with the bakery. Call the clients, check invoices, whatever you need. I hugged him, felt the warmth of my boy, and nodded. I didn't ask questions. I knew he needed time. And so did I. Every morning we opened the shop together. I worked the ovens and arranged the trays. Daniel reviewed orders and called hotels and restaurants. Mom, he said one morning, looking up from a clipboard, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their pastry order for next week. Daniel called to me from the register, his voice steady but missing that spark it used to have. Got it, I said back. Confirm the order. I'll start another batch of dough. It was such a simple exchange, but it gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. No more fake smiles from Mark. No more sweet, calculating words from Emily. Just Daniel and me, holding on to what we still had left. Dinners were quiet now, just the two of us at our little kitchen table. Sometimes rice and beans with chicken, sometimes nothing more than bread and coffee. One night Daniel looked at me with the faintest smile, the first one since the scandal. "Mom, could you make flan this weekend?" Relief spread through me like sunlight. "All right," I said, "but you'll have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded, and in that moment I knew we were slowly, carefully finding our way back. For the first time in decades, I started making space for myself. I joined a cooking club at the community center, surrounded by women my age, swapping recipes and stories. "Linda, your flan is the best in town," one woman laughed when I brought a tray. I smiled and replied, "Just a little trick I picked up years ago in Phoenix." I started going to church on weekends, too. I'd sit in the pews, quiet, watching the light stream through stained glass. I didn't pray for Mark or Emily. I prayed for Daniel. I prayed for myself. That we'd both find the strength to keep moving forward. Sometimes, I walked with Mrs. Carter around the town square, listening to her rattle off neighborhood gossip. "Linda," she told me one afternoon, her eyes bright, "people are still talking about Mark and Emily. But everyone says you're the one who came out on top." I just smiled. Maybe I had won, but the price was losing my family as I knew it. Even Daniel started to change. He was less quiet now, sharing stories from his work as a firefighter. "We put out a big fire at the market yesterday," he told me over dinner one evening. "Scary one. But no one was hurt." I listened with pride, my throat tight. "Please be careful," I whispered. "You're all I've got left." He looked at me with soft eyes. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you." Those words healed something inside me. Even though I'd lost so much, I still had my son. And he was here to stay. One afternoon, with the bakery buzzing, I sat at the register, watching the street outside. The bell on the door rang non-stop, the air thick with the smell of sweet bread. I looked over the trays of pastries and flan and thought about the long road that had brought me here. From a hopeful girl in Phoenix, to a woman who'd weathered betrayal and heartbreak, to someone who stood firm. Mark and Emily had tried to take it all, but they failed. I still had my bakery. I still had Daniel. And most of all, I still had myself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.